on this episode of the Morning Star Podcast.
And in the silence, in that moment where nobody came up right away, nobody started talking, there was just like quiet. The students start leading a song of worship in amongst themselves. Like they literally start singing Scandal of Grace. Oh, to be like you, give all I have just to know you, Jesus. There's no one beside you. And they just start singing, all of a sudden the tent is just erupting with this song a cappella. And just nobody let them. We didn't sing that song. Like that wasn't the last song that they just sang. Yeah. They just started singing that song together. They just so badly wanted to keep worshiping God. Wow. And not a dry eye in the house, man. But just this moment of like thinking, God, where else are people just like begging to worship you like this? So this is so powerful and so cool. You're just so obviously at work here, changing the lives of these students.
Welcome to the Morning Star Podcast, where we engage in meaningful conversations that display God's handiwork and encourage you to live a Jesus-first life.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Morning Star Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Mayhew, and I have with me today Pastor Rob Beckley. Rob, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Jacob. I'm doing really well. How about you?
Good. I'm doing good. Had coffee today. So
always helps.
It's a great day. Yeah. So before we got you here to kind of talk about camp, about the middle school, high school camp called Great Camp that we had recently. Yeah. But before we get into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, why you're on a podcast talking about camp?
Sure. Yeah. Heck yeah. I'm the, like Jacob said, the high school and young adults pastor. So I get to hang out with our young people at church and it's a huge passion. It's a big part of my story and how I came to know the Lord was this season of my life and high school specifically. So it's what I feel like the Lord has given me a heart for. And so that's why I do that. And I've been at Morning Star for 8 or so years now. I started as an intern when I was a freshman at Corbin, came to Corbin to study ministry and have been here ever since. Okay. And I have and I love it. And we love it here. And so I have a wife and her name is Kaylee, and then 2 kiddos, Ellie and Tucker. And so together we just get to be a part of this church, help lead people to pursue a Jesus first life. And this summer it looked like doing that at camp for a while. So that was awesome.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to finally have you on the podcast. I've been kind of hunting for a good excuse for a while. I felt like we had a lot of ministry episodes. So I'm like, not Rob yet. And then camp happened. And I'm like, this is great because I think it's just very clear from talking to people around the church and even from my experience, you're very well respected and loved. And I think your ministry and just the way you live life and love people has been a huge blessing to our family over the course of the time you've been here. Thank you really so much for coming on. Before we delve too much into camp, Great Camp, just AKA camp. Yeah. Yes. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what camp is? Maybe someone's never been to camp.
Sure. Yeah. So just kind of logistically, what is it? Yeah. So, camp is by far our biggest event of our ministry year, for in student ministries. And previously that looked like 2 separate camps. So we would do one specifically for middle school students and one for high school students. But since COVID year, we combined and we have found that there are so many more benefits and we can get into those later. But camp is an opportunity for us to take our students away out of the normal routines and things of life and to go to a space where we can make incredible memories, have tons of fun, and most importantly, learn about God in a way that is, just different than you get to in any other season because we get to do it all day long for 5-6 days straight, and it just creates incredible atmospheres for life change. So, logistically, it's crazy because you got to get almost 300 people by the time you include students, staff, and everybody.
How many students? How many volunteers?
Yeah. So this year we brought 175 students, roughly 100 volunteers. Okay. And then you've got, some volunteers, kids, and some whatever. And so it's really all in total about 300 people that we bring out there. And it's just a huge undertaking when you think about how do you feed 300 mouths 3 meals a day? How do you make sure bathrooms are clean for 300 people? How do you make sure, right? Like, how do you keep those people busy and where are they going to sleep and what are they, So it's awesome. There there are a ton of incredible camps all over the country and great resources for youth groups like us where you bring your youth group to a camp and the program is done, right? It's an official camp. There are camp staff and you bring your group to come be a part of that. And our camp is unique and different in the sense that like our camp is a piece of land, a beautiful piece of land, great property, but we bring every single bit of personnel. We plan every bit of program. And so it's a huge undertaking.
Yeah. No, it is a huge undertaking. I went in 2021. It was my first and thus far only experience with camp. It's a phenomenal time.
Yeah.
Just what sort of things are you doing at camp?
Yeah. Kind of a little overview of what like a day. What does a day look like?
Yeah, that's a great.
What's life like a day of camp? So the cool thing about being where we're at, and I mean, some might find it a little rustic, but most of the kids sleep in tents, and there's a couple of yurts kind of structures on camp that some people can sleep in, but for the most part, everybody's sleeping in tents, and you wake up in your tent next to the lake in a beautiful sunny morning where you can, while you wait for breakfast, sit on the beach and look out at God's creation. And it's like the best way to start a day, man. It's the best way to start a day. But then, your morning is filled with some session time in the morning where we get to worship and spend time together, maybe play a couple games. Breakout sessions are a unique kind of thing that we do where rather than just having another time for a sermon, different spiritual leaders that we bring to camp specifically to teach individual breakout sessions on different topics ranging from certain biblical topics to social issues and conversations that students want to have in relations to that stuff too. And the students get the choice to go to all these different breakouts. And we play big team games and big competitions and we eat fantastic food again, over and over again all week long because Tyler Winters is an incredible kitchen head. And during their free time, they have the option to do all sorts of fun stuff. We bring people out to drive boats. So they go boating on the lake and making memories tubing. And there's, lawn games and yard games set up everywhere. And there's swimming. And this year we made the change from paintball to Orbeez. If you've seen Orbeez guns before.
I don't know what those are.
They're like, they when you hydrate them, they just turn into essentially little water gel balls that hurt much less than a paintball gun and leave way less trace and stuff like that. But the hurting less thing is actually important because not that we don't love a good game of paintball, but we lower the bar of entry so that more kids want to come and have fun. And then the difference being for paintball, you spend so much money in ammunition because paintballs are so expensive. But this stuff, these Orbeez are like $6 for 10,000 shots. What? So it's just like, they can just go crazy all day long.
Oh, that's great.
So that's a really fun thing that we had for them this year. And we bring archery tag and we set up disc golf. And I mean, more than anything though, you look around an afternoon and you just see kids sitting on blankets, talking to each other, talking to their leaders, creating memories, doing things that matter. So, and then in the evening, we have some more intentional worship and some great time in the Word. We bring a camp speaker whose role is to shepherd us and teach us the Word that week, and we're really focused and dialed in on the gospel. It's a uniquely difficult. I wouldn't say maybe unique. There's a lot of areas in the church that are like this, where you got to figure out how am I gonna speak to an unbeliever who desperately needs the good news of the gospel, the hope of Jesus. But I also know that in this room are a ton of people who already follow Jesus, who it's our job to feed and shepherd.
They could be a stage different
and help grow.
Yeah.
So they walk that line really well and do a phenomenal job. And so that's kind of what the evening looks like. And then they spend time in their small groups. And I mean, our whole ministry philosophy is centered around small groups. So this just really sets the tone for small group ministry for the rest of the year. And then they play a night game and go to bed late and, do it all over again. It's pretty awesome.
No, that sounds awesome. Yeah.
It's incredible.
I want to get myself one of them Orbeez guns.
Dude. Yeah.
Yeah. Go camp out by the lake. So I've heard like a lot of conversations about camp this year, and like I've had them. It's come up on stage during sermons or announcements a few times, and just even conversationally about the ways that God has moved this year. Yeah. And it was kind of having these conversations that were like, okay, I feel like we should really just do a podcast about this. Get those stories out, let everyone know what's going on, as opposed to, these whispered things that we don't really have like a means to normally convey, except for like normal conversation. So what are some ways that you saw God move at camp this year?
Yeah, great question. In reality, God is always at work in the lives of these students, whether they're at Triangle Lake or whether they're here, and he's at work at camp every year and and so I agree. This year has felt like, man, there's just been a lot of talk about it. And I think part of that is because, man, God just like, he let us see so much fruit that we don't always get to see, right? Like you do a lot of gardening, you do a lot of planting, you do a lot of watering, and you trust that like, that the Lord takes care of that. The Lord's ultimately the one that deals with that. And we're not owed the fruit to see the fruit, right? From our stuff. But sometimes in his goodness, he just lets us see it anyway. And that was kind of like what this year was, there are always kids getting saved at camp. There are always people, recommitting their lives to Jesus. There's always phenomenal staff, but it just felt like you couldn't throw a stone and not hit somebody whose life is being changed by the Lord and whose heart for why they're there serving is so pure and incredible, or who's like, whatever. It's just stories like that. I mean, I'll think of a couple here.
Yeah. And you can filter out names if you don't want to share the.
Oh, sure. The pit crew is a great example. So their job at camp is to clean bathrooms, take out trash, pick up things around camp, fill water coolers, all that kind of stuff. And I tell you what, that's like a full-time gig for like 6 guys for that week. And I mean, that's all they're doing all day. And like, who would be, who's excited about a job like that? Yeah. And these guys were incredible. I mean, they made shirts for their team to all. They gave each other nicknames. Oh, man. And they worked tirelessly. Yeah. And it wasn't just taking out trashes. It wasn't just filling waters. It's creating opportunities and participating in the ministry that's happening here. And they saw their job as that. And that's really, when you're talking about serving at something like this, is kind of the golden moment where you see your task not just as the thing that you're doing, but as a piece of the greater mission. Yeah. Right. And so they just got it. And then in every chance and every opportunity they'd get, they would grab a student and have awesome conversations with them and see how they're doing and encourage them. And they were there for the students, just like every single staff member was there for the students. And their job was just the stuff that we would all go, oh man, really? Yeah. Oh, tough. And they're just like, this is what we want to do. This is what we're here for. So that's a really cool, way that God worked in those guys' lives and hearts and has been for decades, right? Yeah. The maturity and the growth, it's not like that just happened. God has formed them to be that over years and years of following him, but for sure, yeah. What a blessing to us in that season. I had a student that was in my small group specifically that was really, really special and fun. One, this is just a story that I was close to because he's in my small group, but a friend of some guys that I've had in my group now for a while. And they brought him to camp and said, man, you gotta come and be here this week and do this with us. And he said, okay. And very little church experience or church background or stuff like that. But man, gave his life to the Lord, recognized that he had a need for Jesus, that he was stuck in his sin and needs Jesus, and his life has changed. Man, he got baptized on the last day and has been walking with the Lord since camp, showing up to stuff. And it's just been so awesome.
And there was from at least my conversations, there's like dozens of stories like that.
Exactly.
Right? You guys had 27.
Yeah. We baptized 27 kids. Yeah. And some of those were students who have made decisions to follow Jesus before, and this was just the time where they were going to get baptized. But I think we had almost 20 people give their lives to Jesus for the first time.
Wow. So. That's so good. That's so good.
Yeah.
And it's just so like what you said with God, like just so kindly even showing the fruit of all of this in such a powerful way. Like 27 baptisms. That's like a lot. I'm a horse with cheering at some point, right?
Yeah, dude. And it was so emotional and powerful, and not in the like, oh man, we're all so tired, all we can do is be emotional, but like truly just, moments where siblings are getting baptized and the other siblings are there to wrap them up in a hug at the end, because they're all just so, proud of each other and love each other so much. Just things like that where you're just like, man, this is so good. Like, this is so good. These young people who all the time, the world, the church, even sometimes, marginalizes them in the sense of their faith is a less than faith, or they're less capable or less important or whatever. And even if it's not always said, sometimes it's more felt than said. And just seeing like, man, these guys are world changers, man. Their faith is so strong and so sweet. And I don't know, just makes me really proud of them.
Yeah, no, that's great. We are blessed to have some very just Jesus loving students at our church. And the conversations I have, I mean, several students from the student ministries work in online ministries, which I do a lot. And
it's so cool.
It's just so wonderful. Like, I wouldn't have done that as a high schooler, like middle schooler, especially. Like, I'm like, I just want to sit and doodle. Like, that's all I wanted to do.
Right.
And so it's just wonderful to see all of that happening. So I think I want to circle back to some more stories at some point, maybe, but I kind of want to move on and talk a little bit about why, the why of camp, right?
Yeah.
Because that's something that we've done for years for our student ministries, but last I checked, there's not like let's go on a, adult camp.
Sure.
Right? So why do we do camp? What's the point? What is it involved? What's special about youth, if anything? Or
no, it's a really good question, because not only is it like, well, there's not stuff like that for adults. What's up with that? Or but it's also, I mean, we could do anything else for young students and people. Why do we do camp? And it's a valid question, and one we should keep asking ourselves, because if we don't have good reasons why we do it, then why should we do it? But I find that, and this is what I tell students when we're preparing for camp is, God doesn't need a time like this to where he doesn't need a time, but he wants us to invite him right into our lives and into what we're doing to work and change us. And there's something about being away from our normal routine, being away from all the distractions, being away from some of that stuff that just like consumes our mind and our thoughts in normal life, that gives God room to work that normally we just don't give him. Right. And God's he's not a forceful God all the time. He's not always blowing through our desires. So when we don't think about him and don't choose him and don't want him, we oftentimes don't see growth in those seasons, right? And yet when you're dialed, when you're focused in, when he's the thing that's on your mind, you see so leaps and bounds. And what we accomplish in a week of camp in terms of spiritual growth and maturity and stuff in students takes months and months and months meeting 2 hours every week. Yeah. Right.
Well, and I'm imagining, especially like in our modern moment in the 21st century, the just removal of the distractions so that we actually have space. The students actually have space to hear, and like even the volunteers have more space to hear God talk there and to be with him.
Exactly.
Because we don't have these I don't know where my cell phone is. Yeah. Our pocket distractions machines, right?
Yeah. I mean, we could honestly take away cell phones from people here and probably accomplish, 50% of some of that distraction stuff. Right. But like, it's just really, really impactful. And you combine that with all of the fun stuff that I mentioned that we do, right? Like all the memory making and stuff like that. And all that is awesome. Yeah. But it all serves the purpose of like funneling us towards those really meaningful moments of teaching, of worship, and of small group.
Yeah.
And so, when somebody asks, why do you spend money on buying those stinking Orbi gun things? Like, what does that matter? Well, it matters because when they're on the Orbi's field with their small group members and they, have this incredible memory making moment and then they talk about it and then they're bonded, and then there's kind of bond there. And then, so they sit next to them in the session tent. And then because they're sitting next to somebody who they've kind of started to know and care about, they are more engaged. And then when they get to share memories of times of worship, being next to each other and engaging in that together, and then they get to small group and they're more comfortable talking because they know the people that they're with. And then now you've got more fruitful conversation, more honest conversation, more real life change because these students are making memories together all day long.
Yeah.
So it's really intentional. It's really purposeful why we do all the goofy fun games and the fun stuff, because it all furthers their time talking about things that matter and caring about that stuff. So that's part of why camp, that stuff's really hard to do on a week to week basis around here. And so it's the takeaway and it's the making some really fun memories and adding a lot of joy there so that those small group bonds get really tight. That's why we do camp.
Yeah. I think I've had an image in my head of like, let's all just grab Orbi guns and have a fight after a Sunday service, just in the middle.
It's an idea. It's an idea.
Not a good one, but, so is there anything like special about, doing this for like, maybe just because of their age or where they're at in life for like middle schoolers or high schoolers? Like why don't we do this with like adults or, I guess younger kids? It's probably just being away from home that long is difficult, but
I think, the younger you get, the more logistically challenging you get. It gets. And sadly, the older you get, the more logistically challenging it is too, because how many adults want to take a week off to go and just, what am I accomplishing? What money am I earning? Whatever, am I doing when I'm away at this place for a week? And sadly, adults just don't understand the value in it as very often, it seems like, right? And it's culturally become a thing that's just expected as young kid, young students, they go to camp. But like, think about if you've ever been, when we used to do men's retreats here at Morning Star, same kind of thing, man. You'd go away for a weekend. I remember going to one, the last one we had, and shooting guns with guys that I was just like, man, I've never talked to this guy in my life. Yeah. But now I see him and I remember because we have that memory that was like really formative and really fun. And you grow in leaps and bounds in those opportunities. I actually don't think it's different. I don't think when I think what would help an adult grow in their faith, I bet if you took away their distractions, you got them out of their normal routine, you helped them make some memories with their peers, and then you had them be absorbed in God's word and in worship, over the course of an entire day, it would be the same stuff. Adults are just lame about it because they're like, no, I'm busy. I want to do what I want to do with my time off. I want to do whatever, right?
Or like, I feel like I need to be productive through some arbitrary metric.
Yeah.
Like if I'm not making money, am I like...
Right. And you've got, X amount of vacation days and I don't want to spend that doing that. I want to spend that doing what I want to do because we all want to be the arbiters of our own time and destiny.
Yeah. I think there's almost like, there's a bit of a challenge in that there to listeners who like us are adults to like, sure, we might not have an adult camp and the logistics of that would be difficult, but that doesn't mean we can't make do a camp ourselves, right? In a way, like take a time and intentionally like, I'm going to use this time off or this vacation or this period of my life to just dedicate myself to the Lord in worship and in learning and in community. Yeah.
I talk about, that's when I talk to students about how do we follow Jesus when we go home, right? Like I say, it's really not that complicated, guys. When you bake, you follow a recipe. And you use ingredients, right? And like the cake that we've baked this week has ingredients, right? And those ingredients were lack of distractions. Those ingredients were times of worship. Those ingredients were devotional time in the Word. All being around people who love Jesus. like you can bake that same cake at home.
Mm-hmm.
You just got to be disciplined enough to do it. Yeah. Right. Like that means that when you're sitting in bed, you know, and it's not time to go to bed yet, you don't just like aimlessly scroll on your phone. Maybe you put away the distraction, you spend some time in the Word. And then when you have the opportunity to spend time doing whatever you want to do, maybe you'd try and choose to do it with people who love Jesus, are going to make you better rather than your punk friends. And, you know, and like, it's all these little decisions that really actually, if you just change little things here and there, you bake the same cake. Yeah. So adults can do that too.
Yeah. It's like, the thrust of it is kind of make your life into camp.
Yeah.
Where you're at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to have fun like that all the time.
Right? Yeah. I want to go around, wake up on a lake.
Yeah.
But how much beauty are we just missing around us because we're so much in a hurry, right?
Right.
So I think one thing I wanted to cover too was kind of what your theme for camp was, what your sort of message you were trying to impart to students, right? Because you only have so many times with them, so many sessions where you're giving a message. What sort of things did you focus on, and what sort of takeaways did you hope the student have from that?
Good. Yeah. Awesome. So a huge, I think is really important. Myself, Daniel on the middle school side, or Tyler, like none of us do the speaking at camp. And I think that's important. They hear our voices all the time. They hear from our perspectives. They hear that all the time. Part of getting out of that normal routine and into something different is giving them a different voice to listen to. And so we always bring in camp speakers. And this year, the camp speaker was Brandon Warren, which was special for a lot of reasons, because Brandon was on staff here for a long time. And he was an intern with me when I interned. I was kind of a senior intern to me, and he taught me so much about ministry. And he's now in ministry still, I mean, up in the Oregon City area. But so we brought Brandon down to come and speak. And again, it was just awesome because he's got so many connections, not just with students and compassion for young people, but so many of us adults and leaders who love him and care about him. So that was really sweet. And what's awesome about Brandon is he has this incredible passion for merging the like really scholarly lens of studying the Bible intensely for what it really means, and digging deep the kind of scholastic academic realm with the like ministerial day-to-day pastor, shepherd like role. And he doesn't think that those things need to be separate, and you can bring them together. And so I say that to be like, he's probably one of the most biblically literate, scholarly youth pastors I have ever met. Right? Like, like he's just epic, and not just knows things, but knows how to communicate them in a way that is meaningful and matters for young people. So because his strengths were in that, when we asked him to speak, so Brandon, will you bring kind of your ability to synthesize the story of the Bible as a whole? Will you bring that to the table to help cast a really, one of the clearest pictures then that you can give to an unbeliever about what the whole story of humanity is and why we so desperately need a savior, right? If you paint the whole story of Scripture really clearly, it's really obvious why our sin matters and why we're looking for a snake crusher, this Messiah figure, and why that's Jesus. And so it's really helpful for the unbeliever, but then also for the kid who grew up in the church, and just, what tends to happen, and this is never anybody's like desire, but when you just kind of hear cherry picked stories from all these different books all over the place, and most people never get sat down and shown, what does this really look like cover to cover? Like, where's this going? We read lots of excerpts and we think because they're different books that they're very choppy and not connected.
Well, and even if you're doing your best, you don't know when their brain is enough to actually start retaining information. So you might have started in Genesis, but they don't remember anything until you get to Deuteronomy.
Right. Exactly. And so, it was a great clear picture for unbelievers, but also a really great framework for our believing students, even to just understand the story of the Bible as a whole more. And so that's what it was. It was the whole story of the Bible, of Scripture, in 5 nights. It was crazy. It's getting fed through a fire hose. But kind of the questions of, God makes this perfect world. he makes humanity. We mess it up. But there's this curse, and there's the entrance of sin, but there's this promise that from this line will come one who will crush the head of the snake. And it kind of sets up this question, this narrative tension of like, okay, well, who's that going to be? And then you get introduced to all these characters throughout the whole Old Testament that you think, is this them? No, obviously not. If they did that, no. Is this them? Whoop, nope, missed it. You know, and even just through that framework, you can get through a lot of the Old Testament and touch on a lot of the high points and the key kind of movements. And then we get to Jesus and see how he is. That was exactly what he was sent to do and to be. And so that was the message, and it was really powerful. And what I'm so thankful of and for Brandon, and that he's so true to the text, is I think students walked away with a better understanding of the Bible. You know what I mean?
That's
not
so
like I understand 1 Corinthians 10, 3 better. I understand the Bible better. You know, and when I read something, then I can put it in a little bit of a framework and understand where I'm at and things like that. And that's so powerful, man. I so strongly believe in biblical literacy starting at a young, if you don't graduate high school, being able to like self-feed. Know? I think a little bit about like how old does my son have to be before he can feed himself? It's like, well, okay, right now he can like hold his bottle. But like I still had to make the bottle. I still had to do the thing. I still had to whatever, right? But he can hold the bottle. So he's getting there. But he's going to move from holding the bottle to holding a spoon to, you know, my daughter can go and grab a snack out of the fridge and open it and eat it. She's like kind of getting there. You know what I mean? And our spiritual lives are a lot like that. You know, in the beginning, somebody literally has to make you a bottle, hold it to your mouth. And hold you there while you drink. But the more you're taught and the more time you have to grow and develop, the more skills you get to be able to feed yourself. And that's my goal, is like when somebody would graduate high school, that they would not know everything, not be biblical scholars, but be able to open the Bible and interact and know, you know, the God of the universe and feed themselves in that way. So,
and that's so important, as I mean, when people graduate high school, that's a huge line of like, oh, am I going to follow the faith or not? Right. Which is why so many colleges are wild with people trying to figure out what they actually believe.
Right.
And so
you get out from under the, you know, expectation of families and things like that, where you're truly given the freedom to decide for yourself what you're going to think. And that's a blessing, and also really scary.
It's sort of a trial by fire in a way. So that's just a wonderful theme. Do you have any like stories or like moments like where you just saw like an epiphany or something in like a student's eyes, or just somehow like the takeaway of the message or something just really impacted them or anything like that?
I had multiple students who, some of the Old Testament stories that we touched on made so much more sense when you looked at it through the lens of trying to understand, is this person supposed to be the one? You know, there's all this, there's all these, you know, stories, and you think about even just like the life of King David, for example. All the different parts of that, whether you start, you know, in the beginning with his battle with Goliath, or the you know, times where he's running from Saul and before he's even established as king. And then there's some of the decisions he makes as king. And you're like, the Bible is actually setting you up to kind of think, this might be the guy. Like this might be the one, you know, that we're after. And the expectation gets so high, and then his shortcomings of his sin and all that to say, like, I felt like there were so many light bulb moments of students understanding why these stories matter more than just being fairy tales. You know what I mean? Like, it's one thing to tell a student, this isn't a fairy tale, this is a historical story. Okay, great. And it's like, okay, this is actually a historical story that plays a purpose in the grand narrative of human existence, because it was a really important point for these people, and it shows us more about who this snake crusher person needs to be, and why we as our own as ourselves are, in desperate need and are not that in ourselves. And so, there were some moments like that. And then the flip side of understanding why Jesus so clearly was what was needed, and every time I can do anything to communicate to students why Jesus is so important is such a win, right? Because that was a huge part of why the gospel hit for me when I was a young student, was because I recognized that Jesus wasn't just cool. He wasn't just an option. He wasn't just a religion. I needed him because he was exactly the thing that the only way that my sin was going to be paid for, the only way to be right with God, and that need has drawn me back time and time again, and in doubt or in pain or in trouble, whatever. It's like, no, I know I need Jesus. Yeah. He's the only way. And I think I saw some light bulbs like that for students. Like, man, that's why Jesus had to be this. And that's why Jesus had to be this. That's why he had to do this. That was really powerful.
That's good. No, that's really good. And I think even as like adults, and I imagine many of the volunteers had this experience of just like hearing those messages, hopefully again, maybe even for the first time for some of them, those are just things that we never move beyond needing Jesus, right?
Exactly.
And in the hurry and bustle of our day, it's sometimes easy to like, maybe you don't forget it, but you just stop thinking about how much you need Jesus because, gosh, you got to go take the car to get, looked at and all that stuff. And so I think that's I'm really happy that our students are able to take that away from camp. Yeah. And I'm hoping that you family who are listening are also able to take away several of these same lessons that our students were.
Right.
Because we don't grow beyond those simple things sometimes.
Exactly. You always need to understand that desperate need for Jesus. Otherwise the other stuff, like, none of the other stuff matters, none of the other stuff changes anything if you don't recognize how much you need Jesus. So really, really thankful. Brandon did an awesome job.
Good.
It's always hard to know, like, do we want to set the expectation, the whatever for what speakers are going to talk about? Do we want to give them a passage? Do we want to whatever? And it's hard because I trust the Lord's leading and guiding in the life of a speaker. If that's the speaker that the Lord has brought to us, I trust that, and I trust them as shepherds and all those things. So it was awesome with Brandon to just be so confident and not have to wonder, am I supposed to give him something or not? Because I was like, Brandon, I know you're awesome at this. I know this is exactly where your heart is. Will you share that heart with our students? And he's like, oh yeah.
So, that's so great.
It was sweet.
That's so great. Do you have any like moment at camp where you were just like struck with, oh my gosh, I just saw God, or I just saw God at work in this moment? Maybe it was an interaction you had or saw between you and students, or some students, or between some volunteers, or anything like that. Or maybe it's just a sunrise and a moment you and God had or something. But
the really most powerful one, the last night. So we had our like teaching. We had been dismissed for small groups. We came back for more worship, and I don't know. We sang 2 or 3 songs of worship, and it was just powerful, man. I mean, students, a tent full of students crying out to the Lord, arms raised, like just surrendering to Jesus. It was so powerful. And in the programming meeting earlier, when I was like, what are we going to do for session? I was like, okay, we're going to do worship. And then, we kind of need to do like team points and all this random, So I was like, how are we going to go from this impactful, incredible time of worship to, and the blue team I was like, oh man, that's going to feel so janky. I was like, okay, I don't know. Let's put in just like a little decompression moment for there to just be silence. And I don't know, like looking back, I know that was totally the Lord orchestrating that ahead of time, because I've never said that. I've never done that. I don't have the wherewithal about me to know how to do these things. And so man, the worship dies down, and it was so impactful. And in the silence, in that moment where nobody came up right away, nobody started talking, there was just like quiet. The students start leading a song of worship, in amongst themselves. Like they literally start singing Scandal of Grace. Oh, to be like you, give all I have just to know you, Jesus. There's no one beside you. And they just start singing, like, and all of a sudden the tent is just erupting with this song a cappella. Wow. And just nobody let them, we didn't sing that song. Like that wasn't the last song that they just sang. Yeah. They just started singing that song together. They just so badly wanted to keep worshiping God. And Hannah looks at me from the stage and goes like, and I'm like, yes. You know, hands up, kind of like, do you want me to? And I said, yeah, go for it. And so she flips over to Scandal of Grace and we start singing and just, I mean, not a dry eye in the house, man, but just this moment of like thinking, God, where else are people just like begging to worship you like this? So like this is so powerful and so cool. You're just so obviously at work here, changing the lives of these students. And so I don't know, man, that was probably the most powerful one for me. It was just like, these kids just want to worship you. Yeah. You're so good, God. They just want to worship you. How cool is this? When was the last time we, you know, a cappella called a song from Sunday morning? Yeah. Something, you know, someone's about to give on stage, give like announcements or sermon. And then we're just all in the crowd still like singing something. That's right. Wow. That's powerful. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. That. I'm like almost there.
Yeah.
It's
same.
Like crazy.
I also just love that it takes like a certain level of emotional, like just willingness to do that as part of the students. Like, my gosh, oh no, as an adult, I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, all the procedures we're disrupting. We're going to make things run long.
Yeah, right. We immediately think of the 10 million reasons why, we shouldn't do that. Yeah. It's like, they don't care, man. Yeah. They just want to worship the Lord.
And you know what? Maybe that's more important than our 10 million reasons, right?
Well, funny enough.
Yeah. No, that's so good. That's so good. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Thank Lord.
Yeah. I think one thing I want to touch on, two-part question, kind of one. Okay. Are there any like lessons that either you learned from camp or that you think our church family could learn from this year's camp? Maybe it's related to things we've talked about or something brought up in the message. Maybe it was just something that a student did that you think is just a good inspiration for our family or to learn from or anything like that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I got a couple coming to mind. Sure. I think one that we can learn from the students is kind of like what you were just saying is, you know, we really don't need to let our own thoughts of why not to do things or the practicalities or the whatever, get in the way of what we know is right. You know, what in the moment, whether that's giving the Lord the worship that he's due or just doing the right thing, serving somebody, putting someone's needs before your own. There's always practical reasons, quote unquote, not to serve the Lord. Yeah. Right. And sometimes we need to put those to the side and allow the most important thing to be the most important thing. So that's one I think that students teach, and to be fair, students teach me that often because they don't have the same like hindrances that we literally put stumbling blocks in our own ways doing this stuff. And they're like, why would I do that? That's silly.
Yeah. Maybe they're not as cynical or as busy or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, but then the other one, I'm constantly reminded when I look at this incredible staff of course, the discipleship leaders who just give their life week after week to pour into students and who all just love it. And then I look at, you know, kitchen crew and pit crew and comp team and all the volunteers, the camp moms and the boat drivers and everything that it takes to run camp. I just think like how much joy they have in what they're doing, how good they are at what they're doing, how much they care. I mean, I can't tell you how many people from camp volunteers have already come back to me and said, hey, here's what I think we should do differently next year. Like, here's what I could do to make this better. And, you know, if people care that much, they like what they're doing. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It just like shows me and reminds me that the Lord has somewhere that he wants you to serve that is going to just like bless you, bless your socks off. It's not to say it's not like always fun and not hard. I mean, I'm sure when the kitchen crew was waking up at 5 a.m. to make eggs again, they're like, man, this is kind of stinky.
Yeah.
But like the joy of serving in the capacity that the Lord has made you to serve is so good. that there's just really no feeling like it. One of my leaders, Janice, she's older. Sorry to out you, Janice. But she would joke about it herself.
Yes. I've heard her joke as much.
Yeah.
Yes.
Her story is so cool and so powerful because she came to me when they were newer at this church and said, I think the Lord might want me to serve in youth ministry. And that's kind of weird. Like I don't know anything really about that. Like but she was just being bold and being willing, just being sensitive to where the Lord might be leading her. And she has found more joy in leading these students to Jesus than I could have. I've basically seen anybody have joy from doing anything. Like she just loves it so much. And it's because it's exactly, she knows like it's exactly what the Lord wants me to do. And she'll tell you over and over again, there's nothing like serving where God wants you to serve. And so whether that's at camp or not at camp, there's a million places to serve and to help. And just know that there is one for you that is going to bring you so much joy and fill your cup, and not in the selfish way, like you're doing it for you, but just in the sense of like the confidence of knowing, God, this is what you made me to do. Like, this is awesome. So fun.
Oh, that's so good.
Find
that's
that,
so good.
do that. Cause you're going to be the most helpful, the most, you'll care the most, you'll give the most, you'll honor the Lord the most when it's something like that.
Yeah. And when you're serving in the way God wants you to, like, that's just so glorifying to him too. Yeah. To especially like put down, like taking up Janice. It's like, if you're stereotypical older, you're like, I'm too old for youth ministry. It's like, God doesn't use those words. God doesn't use that box. Like, come on. Paul was still probably writing letters to and helping minister to like young people when he was in his 70s, 80s, or however long he lived. Right. Yeah. And I think that's just a beautiful thing for everyone in our church family to take away. And I think one thing I want to reiterate, I don't know if we explicitly said it, it's been hinted at several times. The vast majority of this, what you've been calling staff, are volunteers.
Oh, yeah. Almost exclusively.
Yeah, exclusively. Like, you're obviously a paid youth pastor.
Yes.
Hopefully.
Yeah. And there's, just barely. No, just kidding. I'm just kidding. That's a youth ministry stereotype. But I will say, and I know this is pretty unique, is that all of Morning Star staff cares deeply about camp. Oh yeah. And that is really special and really cool. So there are actually many people out there who are on Morning Star staff, but they don't have to be doing camp. No, they don't have to be there. The list of those of us who are staff members who have to be there, very short. Yes. The vast majority, 90-something% of people that are there are giving of their time, and not just giving of their time, like not getting paid for anything. They're probably taking they're taking vacation time. Yeah. They're dropping shifts. They're whatever. There's a detriment to that, so that they can come and give of that time. Yeah. And they're bringing their own personal stuff, and they're like, it's just crazy, man. Yeah. And so family, like if you're listening and you're hearing like these things that God is doing in our student ministries, in our church family, and that's something that moves you and you want to be a part of that, like, volunteer. We would love to have you. We would love to have more people invested and involved. And I think kind of talking to the other side, the people who aren't, but what would you say? I'm sure we have some people who listen to the podcast who were at camp, whether they were a volunteer or a student. Yeah. Is there anything you would like to just kind of say to them? Yeah, I mean, just thank you. Thank you. If you served at camp, thank you for giving of your time. Thank you for giving of your talents and your treasures. Thank you for investing in not just the church of tomorrow, but the church of right now. And will they be church leaders someday? Yeah. But right now they're part of the church, and they're valuable members of the kingdom of God who are some of the most like evangelical, you know, like first to share their faith, you know,
unashamed.
kind of people, unashamed. Exactly. And so thank you for investing in them. Thank you for, laying yourself down, your life down, your preferences down, all that kind of stuff, to care about people who really matter. And, so I appreciate that from the bottom of my heart. There is nothing I could have done to put on camp myself, right? Like, no. If it wasn't for people, there would be no camp. And I know that without a shadow of a doubt. So thank you. And if you're a student who came to camp, cool that you listen to the podcast. Good for you.
I'm excited.
Yeah, that's awesome. And remember, you have the ingredients to bake the cake. You can bake that cake at home. You can bake that cake on your family's vacation. You can bake that cake at school. You just take some intentionality. So put the first things first.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. I think that's basically about the time that we have. Cool. I want to reiterate, thank you so much to everyone who volunteered at camp, and thank you to the students for going and being open. Yeah.
I will say thank you to, there's another group. There are many who did not go, but still prayed. There are many that did not go, but who gave scholarship money. I think we had almost 30 kids go on scholarship this year who would not have been able to go had it not been for the generous donations of people who made that happen. I mean, and that's an incredible ministry right there. The students who would not have been able to go had it not been for someone's generosity to say, no, I want to sponsor kids to go to camp. Yeah. So thank you. If that was you, I just didn't want that to go unsaid. Yeah.
No, that's important. Yes. Thank you everyone who gave generously of your time, of your prayers, of your money, of any of those. Yeah. Do you have any like last closing thoughts? Anything you want to make sure you get out there before we wrap things up?
Just that, you know, I'm so thankful that we have a church that cares so deeply about their student ministries. You know, I know a lot of guys in my field and profession who feel like they're the ministry that's like out back, that you kind of like plug your nose and cover your eyes like when you walk past or whatever. And our church just loves students, you know, so much and cares about them so much. And so know that is such a huge blessing to me. It makes working here the best job ever. And if you're somebody whose heart beats for young people who are excited by the idea of ministry like this, come and talk to me, come and find me, come and find Daniel, come and find, you know, any of those guys, because we always want people on our team whose heart beats for young people to follow Jesus.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And if you're interested in learning more about student ministries, in addition to talking to them, we'll put contact information in the episode description. But feel free to also look. We have had Daniel Bennett, who is our current middle school director, on the podcast a couple episodes ago. Great conversation. Feel free to scroll back and listen to that. We also had Tyler Mock on several months ago to talk about middle school ministry specifically.
So cool.
And so those are just two resources for you to be able to listen to and hear more about it. Thank you so much, Rob, for being on.
Thank you, Jacob. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, my pleasure. Where can people find you kind of around the church?
Yeah. So my family and I, I'm typically here both services. During the 11 o'clock service, we do what's called the student section. So if you're looking at the stage, it would be in the front left. And so that's usually where I'm at with my wife over there with a bunch of students. Nice. We're not scary. We don't bite. They're not like smoking pot in the front row. Like, just come over and hang out with us and come and talk. I'd love to interact with you there. My email, my phone number, all of that's on the website. That's all my direct personal stuff. I don't give anybody the runaround. And then if you want to come to the office, I work in what's known as the Bat Cave. So you have to go downstairs to the way back of the office. I work in a scary place down there, but it's good. It's nice. Good. I always want to make myself available for people.
Yeah. And Riot is generally, our high school ministry is generally Wednesday evenings. We're taking a break for the month of August.
Yeah. So currently this is Monday the 24th or something like that, I think. At the time of recording, this Wednesday, the 26th is our last Riot for the summer. But then we're going to start back up in September. Okay. And every Wednesday, 7 to 9.
Yeah. Awesome. And thank you so much, family, for listening. I hope your lives have been touched, not just by our conversation, but by everything that happened at camp, by the students there. Get to talk to them, get to know them. I'm sure they have great like stories themselves that they would love to share with you. And thank you for everyone who volunteered and who helped to make camp possible through any method. And until next time, have an absolutely wonderful and blessed week. Thank you so much, Rob, for coming on and sharing. And we'll see you again in a couple weeks.
Thanks, church family.
Thanks for tuning in to the Morning Star Podcast. Join us again next time as we display God's handiwork and encourage you to live a Jesus-first life.